Good evening. It was the holiday of September 7th, and the idea of camping struck us as an excellent way to make the most of the days off. Hailing from Londrina, in the heart of Paraná, we rented a car and set off towards a rural haven in Sapopema, also on Paraná soil. We were a quartet, me, my partner, and two inseparable friends. We departed on the morning of September 4th, and around 10:30 or 11 in the morning, we reached our destination. Upon arriving in Sapopema, the property caretaker and his daughter were already awaiting us at the corner of a truck gas station, as we weren't certain of the exact route. They arrived in their pickup, and we followed them in our car all the way to the property. Once at the location, we chose a picturesque spot near a lake to pitch our tents and park the car. The site was known for its camping grounds and hiking trails, and other groups had already taken advantage of the surroundings. Most congregated near the caretaker's house, where some festive lights were strung up and a bonfire crackled merrily. The caretaker and his daughter offered us a spot near their residence, but we opted for the privacy that the lakeside would afford us. During the day, the atmosphere was one of pure relaxation. We shared drinks, lively conversations, and pleasant melodies. The caretaker's daughter, with her peculiar kindness, brought us dry branches to ensure a cozy bonfire for the night. They were simple folk, with the genuine hospitality of the countryside, who did not stay overnight on the property, returning to the comfort of their home in the city at nightfall, leaving us to enjoy the solitude of nature. As dusk deepened, around 7:30 in the evening, after we had all refreshed ourselves with a swim, we went down again to light our own bonfire. We continued our evening celebration with dancing, sips of liquor, songs, and each other's company, enveloped by the warmth of the flames. I recall that night with striking clarity. Everything seemed in perfect harmony, and the joy we shared was intense, as we had rarely felt before. The moonlight was so bright that at a certain moment we noticed that the supply of kindling was almost exhausted, and the flames of the bonfire transformed into slender tongues of fire, dancing beneath the silvery moonlight that bathed the landscape. When we finally settled down to rest and chat, a sense of isolation washed over us as we looked around. Nothing but wild vegetation and towering trees surrounded us. We were, quite literally, in the heart of untamed nature. In the distance, the nocturnal chorus of frogs echoed in the stillness. We began to admire the beauty of the moon, exchanging comments about its splendor, but no sinister thought dared to cross our minds in that moment of serenity. We looked up in the direction where the rest of the campers had set up near the caretaker's house, and everything was plunged into darkness, the lights extinguished like an ominous sign that sleep had embraced them. After savoring every moment of that magical night, we decided to surrender to rest as well. The bonfire had already died down. Our friends retreated to their tent, and we did the same in ours. What ensued was of such a disturbing nature that the memory remains vivid in my mind. I remember clearly zipping up the tent and lying down. Barely. A minute had passed when we began to pick up sounds of footsteps. They were steps that wavered between human walking and the creeping of a creature, accompanied by a bestial panting. And indeed, it wasn't long before we confirmed it was an animal. Our friends in their neighboring tent whispered if we were also hearing those unusual noises. We confirmed quietly, and almost immediately they inquired again, with a tone of increasing apprehension. Then, that sinister presence moved toward their tent and began to sniff it aggressively. From our tent, we heard every movement, every inhalation of that unknown thing. A time that felt like an eternity dragged on, and then the same presence approached our tent, and I felt the warm breath of the creature brush against my neck through the fabric. I remember every hair on my body standing on end in an icy shiver. Fear paralyzed me, and for a moment I feared my days would end right there. I couldn't identify what was out there, sniffing us like hungry predators. It was the worst feeling I had ever experienced. Even now, recalling that moment, the anguish returns with a piercing clarity, as if I were reliving that nightmare. We remained motionless, consumed by the terror of what might happen next. A sepulchral silence hung over us until the creature's noises gradually faded away. After an agonizing half hour, we finally dared to whisper to each other, checking if everyone was all right. We were physically unharmed, but sleep had fled from us on that haunted night. I remember lying with my eyes wide open throughout the early hours, apprehensive about the possibility that this malevolent presence would return to carry out the worst. A peculiar detail that deserves mention is that night, our friend prepared a drink for all of us using those aluminum university mugs, and at dawn the mug had mysteriously vanished. We searched every nook and cranny, rummaging through our belongings and the surrounding area, but it was nowhere to be found. That very morning, we decided to seek out the caretaker and his family to report the events of the previous night. Upon reaching their house, we spotted the mug, curiously soiled with earth, resting on a low wall. We were intrigued, trying to decipher how it had gotten there and how it had acquired that inexplicable layer of dirt. We shared our entire story with the caretaker's wife, as he was not present that morning. She listened to us with an expression of disbelief, almost mocking, and we decided not to insist on convincing her of the truthfulness of our account. That very morning, a huge dog, of a breed we hadn't noticed before on the property, appeared, as if out of nowhere. We asked the caretaker's wife about the animal if it belonged to them. She denied ever having seen it before, stating that it was the first time her eyes had met that dog. Strangely, from the moment of its arrival, the animal did not leave our side for a single instant. It accompanied us on our hikes through the woods and remained by our side until the moment of our departure. There was also a bucket of feed that the caretaker had left for us to feed the fish in the lake, hoping to catch them. That bucket had tipped over during the night and the feed was scattered around. Until then, we only had these inexplicable events to share. But one evening, during dinner at a couple of friends' house, we recounted our terrifying camping experience. Our friend's husband, upon hearing the details, suggested that it could only have been a werewolf, that perhaps it had been observing us from afar, and that if we had taken any pictures that night, there would certainly be something strange recorded in one of the images. Intrigued by the suggestion, we opened the photos on our cell phones and were absolutely shocked by one of them. In it, it was possible to distinguish some small bluish dots slightly behind a tree, with an arrangement that resembled eyes. We vividly recalled that there was absolutely nothing behind that tree that could have caused any kind of reflection or light emission. The place was completely devoid of any light source. I cannot say for certain if it was really a werewolf, but the conviction that something supernatural was observing us on that cold night remains unshakable. Not to mention that if my memory doesn't fail me, that night of terror was the early morning of September 5th, 2020. Just to reiterate about the tent incident, the creature did not actually enter our space to sniff our necks. If it had, I probably wouldn't be here to share this story. It merely sniffed us over the fabric of the tent and around it, a thin fabric that was the only barrier between us and the unknown. And that thing remained there for an agonizing time, inhaling our fear over that thin layer of protection. Good night. Good evening. My name is Gyro, and I will narrate an event that profoundly marked me in the year 2007. It was a night that promised to be tranquil. I was driving along the old dirt road, a shortcut I frequently used to shorten the route to my parents' house in the countryside. The clear sky displayed a radiant full moon, which bathed the road in its silvery light, and the temperature was pleasantly mild. After a long, exhausting workday, I longed for the moment of arrival and the much-anticipated rest. At a certain point on the journey, I felt an uncomfortable pressure on my bladder and decided to stop to relieve myself. I parked the car on the side of the road, turned off the engine, and moved a few meters away to a more secluded patch of low vegetation. That brief moment outdoors, under the intense light of the car headlights, should have been refreshing, but I had no idea of the mistake I was making. Upon finishing, I returned to the vehicle and tried to start the ignition, but the engine remained inert. I turned the key again and only heard a dry click. I sighed, remembering that the battery had already been showing signs of weakness for some time, but I had postponed the replacement, believing it would last a little longer. And in fact, It would have lasted if I hadn't turned off the car and left the lights on. At least that's what I supposed. Fortunately, my cell phone caught a faint signal, despite being isolated in the middle of nowhere. I called my brother and explained the situation. "Brother, my battery died. I'm stranded on the dirt road near the old bridge. Could you come give me a hand?" I asked, trying to remain calm. My brother Carlos was always helpful. He said he was already on his way and would arrive shortly. Now, I had the headlights off, to conserve as much battery power as possible, hoping to make starting easier when Carlos transferred the charge from his battery to mine. Time dragged slowly, and finally I spotted the headlights of my brother's car cutting through the darkness. When he parked, I took the cables to make the connection. Suddenly, a quick movement caught my attention. Something large and shadowy lurked at the edge of the woods. "What is that?" I murmured, as the headlights of my brother's pickup approached. A terrifying figure stood right in the middle of the road, now very close to my car. Carlos, getting closer, could also discern that sinister silhouette. It was a werewolf, a colossal creature with sharp and menacing teeth. A guttural growl echoed near my vehicle. The creature seemed attracted by the light of my brother's pickup headlights. Carlos, noticing the approach of that abomination near his car, accelerated sharply, hitting the creature and throwing it about 2 meters away. But it stood up as if nothing had happened. My heart was already pounding wildly as I shrank into the driver's seat, desperately trying not to be noticed by that aberration. My brother, seeing that he couldn't fight that thing, floored the accelerator and disappeared into the darkness. My car was completely dark and immobile, and I lay there, trying not even to breathe, praying that the creature wouldn't perceive my presence. The next few minutes were pure terror. The werewolf sniffed around my car several times, but eventually lost interest in that inert object and disappeared into the dense forest. I released the breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. I spent the rest of the night locked inside the car, not daring to move until the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon. With the sunrise, the dirt road didn't seem so threatening. I got up, stretched my legs, and decided to try my luck with the cell phone again. I called my brother again, and in a short time he arrived to rescue me. Carlos apologized for running away, explaining that he wouldn't have been able to do anything against that creature. And I understood. I didn't want my brother to risk his life trying to face that evil thing. We all got out of that terrifying situation unharmed. That night remained etched in my memory as a chilling reminder that, even on the most familiar roads, darkness can conceal things we never imagine encountering. Good night.